What's up guys, Kyle here again, and today is Fackin' Friday. Real quick before we jump into your guys' questions, I want to tell you about my band, Human Animal. We are doing a full set multi-camera live stream courtesy of a local venue who will basically be switching the cameras and everything, doing the professional sound for us on Sunday night, and that'll happen at 8 p.m. So I will leave a link up in this video, and also I will share the links around on my socials, including Instagram, and make a YouTube community post the night of. So if you guys want to tune in for that and check out my band playing a full 1 hour live set, you can do that. Would be really cool to have you guys there and check out this band, as this will be my first show with the band as the new guitarist, so I'm really looking forward to it. There will be some awesome punk rock riffs, there will be some bad dad jokes, and there will most definitely be some cool gear. So if that's something you guys are interested in, again, I will link to that down below, and I'll be sharing it around over the next couple of days so that you guys don't miss out on it. We'll see you there. With that being said, let's jump into those questions. Neji H says, hey man, wanted to ask, how does running a cab in stereo work? If you use 2 amps into a 212 cab, does each amp sound through only one of the speakers? If so, how do you know which amp sounds through which speaker? Thank you. Thanks for the question, man. Glad to have you back on the show. So running amps in stereo through the same cab. If you're running through a 2x12 cab and that cab has the ability to run stereo, it should have 2 separate inputs. And sometimes the inputs on the jack will tell you which jack goes to which speaker. Sometimes if it's a vertical 212, the plate will say this jack top speaker, this jack bottom speaker, and it'll give you individual power handlings. But if not, all you have to do is plug the amps in one at a time and then listen to see which amp is going to come through which speaker. Now typically this, depending on the cab, will cut the ohms in half, so make sure that you're watching your ohm rating on the back of your head to make sure that you are matching the rated impedance of the individual speaker, which is typically going to be 8 ohms because most 212 cabs are 16 ohms, but again, if it's an 8 ohm cab, a lot of the times that'll cut it down to 4 ohm. Make sure that you have those matched up, because the last thing that you want to do is blow up your head. And secondly, make sure that you know the rated wattage handling of each speaker. That way you're not pumping a 120 watt head into a speaker that can only handle 50 watts, because that's a quick recipe for a bad night as well. You're going to blow up your speaker, and then you're possibly going to blow up your amp once the speaker dies as well. So you really want to be careful when running amps into a cab stereo to make sure that everything is properly set up. And again, if the jack plate does not have which jack goes to which individual speaker listed, just plug the amps into each jack one at a time, and then you will be able to quickly find out which jack is for which speaker. So hope that helps, man. Running amps stereo into the same cab can be a lot of fun, but you're also going to want a proper ABY switch that has a phase lift, because most amps tend to phase out with each other, especially in the same cab. So if you don't have that switch, things might sound really thin and really bright when you're expecting them to sound really fat and really full. So also keep that in mind. Derek Weber asks, are you familiar with Traynor amps? They are pretty much Canadian Marshalls. Beefy overspec Hammond transformers make it a modder's paradise. Thanks for your question, Derek. And yeah, I actually am familiar with Traynor, although I have only ever played one Traynor amp in my life, and it was an amp that sat at my local music store for probably 2 to 3 years, and it looked really cool. It was like 3 or 4 stacked channels, like the control panel was huge. I don't remember the exact model of the amplifier, but I really wanted to like that amp. Like, I plugged into it probably 6 or 7 times over the course of the years that it sat in my local music shop, and every time I plugged into it, I was extremely underwhelmed. It just never really produced a sound that I thought was inspiring anyway. It was a very dull sounding amp. I don't judge all other Traynors based on that amp by any means, because I know that they have a lot of fans. They have kind of like a small cult following, and I'm really actually surprised that I don't see them more often, because Canada is 25 miles across the lake that way. I mean, Niagara Falls is like less than 2 hours from where I am, so to get into Canada, it really doesn't take much at all, but I still just never really see Traynor gear around, and that's kind of a bummer, because I would definitely like to try some of their stuff. I don't believe that they're still a company. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that they are still a company. I don't think that they're still making amplifiers, so that's a bummer. But if you guys out there know of any cool Traynor amp models that I should be keeping an eye out for, please let me know down in the comments, because I'm not all that familiar with their lineup. I don't know which ones are worth checking out. If it's true, if they do have some Marshall-esque style. If they do have some Marshall style amplifiers in their range that I should be keeping an eye out for, that I could get here on the channel, that would be really cool to check out. Let me know, because I am definitely interested, and I don't really ever see them pop up, but every now and then I do, and I kind of have to go research stuff to see if they're anything worth checking out, and most of the time they're not. So again, if you guys know of any cool sleeper amps in the Traynor lineup, put them down in the comments. That way I know what to look for. Thank you. The Axe Forever asks, have you ever played through either the Randall V2 or T2 heads? They would be considered hybrid amps, I guess, but lean more towards solid state amps. They're killer for the classic metal tones, and I remember seeing Gus G playing T2 amps before he switched to Blackstar. I actually preferred his Randall tones over his later Blackstar tone. Thank you for your question, man, and no, I have never played those amps, although I have kind of been on the lookout for them low-key for a really long time. Back when I first joined the 7string.org forum, that's still one of the better forums that I have found, where people aren't completely ridiculous and toxic. A lot of people seem to talk about a lot of the older Randall amps, the solid state amps, quite a bit, and the T2 and V2 being among those amps. So I am very much interested in those. I have never had the chance to try those amps, and it seems like they're pretty difficult to come by, because in my years and years of trying to find one, I don't actually think I have ever seen one for sale. So they must be really difficult to come by, because I've never even seen one for sale. I've never even seen one where I had the opportunity to try and buy it. So that's a bummer. I'm really interested in a lot of the old Randall solid state stuff, just because that's all stuff that you don't see very often. It's stuff that I have had a really hard time coming across. Like, it doesn't really ever pop up in my area for whatever reason, and I've never had the opportunity to try it. You guys know that I've tried tons and tons of amps. I've had experience with most of the amps that you guys ask about, but there are certain brands and models, as this episode is showing, where I have next to no experience with them. Laney being another one. I did get a GH100L and a GH50L in recently, but unfortunately I turned them around quicker than I could make videos with them. But those amps were actually surprisingly awesome, and I will definitely be on the lookout to grab another one so I can make a cool demo for you guys in the future. But yeah, there are a few brands that I don't have a lot of experience with. Randall is definitely one of those. I've messed around with the Thrasher and the Satan and the Diavolo, their newer Fortin collaborated series. But as far as their old solid state stuff, man, I have next to no experience with any of those amps. So those are definitely some ones that, again, you guys let me know what models that you think that I should check out down below in the comments. That way I know what to look for. I know that, like, the Century is definitely one to go after. The RG100ES is one to go after. And then the T2 and V2 for sure, but I know that there are more models than that. Is the Warhead a solid state amp? I believe that that's a solid state amp. I could be wrong, but if there is but even if so, if it's not, I'm still interested in checking out the Randall Warhead. But again, that's a really hard one to come by. I missed out on a pair of the Warhead cabs a couple years ago, but they didn't have the amp with it. So I'm always on the hunt for Randall stuff, especially their cabs, because their cabs are built extraordinarily well, and they usually look badass too, and most of them come with good speakers in them. So let me know down in the comments what amps from Randall that I should be adding to my list of amps that I'm looking for, not only for myself personally, but to get here on the channel, and I would appreciate it. Thanks! Classic Pass says, you like Aldi's? Aldi's nuts. Theo Fabian asks, how does the Splawn Competition 50 compare with your VHT's Deliverance series, since previously it's one of your favorite top plexi amps? Thank you for the question, man. And I would not consider the VHT Deliverance a plexi style amplifier. I mean, VHT is just, it's got such a significant special voicing. Like, all their amps have just a really signature character to them that don't sound like anything else. The Deliverance definitely does not sound anything like a plexi, whereas the Splawn really can kind of nail those plexi tones. So the VHT stuff is definitely, although it is very dry and stiff and articulate, very much the way that I described the Splawn stuff, I would say that the VHT stuff is actually more dry. It has a little bit more of a buzziness to the distortion character. It's weird because they're dry, but they still have a little bit of a fizz to them. It's kind of hard to explain. And the VHT honestly it's easy to make those amps sound bad. It's easy to make them sound like they have no character because you really have to dig in to get the goods out of them to really get them to open up. And if you aren't really hitting those strings hard, they can sound a little bit dull. With the Splawn stuff, I've noticed that they're extremely dynamic amps, but they can still sound good if you're not hitting the strings hard, depending on what you're going for, especially if you're going for more of the classic rock thing. You can pull back the strength on your hand that you're hitting the strings with in order to give it almost more of a clean tone that still sounds good. It won't sound dull and lifeless. It'll just sound, you know, kind of less distorted, less saturated. So I do think that they compare in that they are both dry, articulate amps that have a very stiff feel to them, but the Splawn very much in the Marshall or modded Marshall camp. As soon as you hear one, you're gonna think Marshall tones all day, whereas when you hear the VHT, it's much more modern and it really does not remind you of anything else. They just have such a signature voicing to them that it's not like you hear it and you go, oh, that sounds kind of like this mixed with this. It's like, no, man, a VHT is a VHT and it sounds like a VHT, and there really isn't anything else out there to compare it to that is actually going to be similar other than basic characteristics like how tight or how articulate they are, and how articulate I am able to speak on a camera. It's really cool. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got for the answer to that question, man. Pedra says, I can't for the life of me understand why Splawn isn't a better known name. This isn't really a question, but yeah, man, I wanted to touch on this because I love Splawn amplifiers, and Scott Splawn, great dude. He custom built this 50 watt KT88 Super Sport for myself and Derek Verici, my other guitarist in Bushido Code, and we are massive fans of the Splawn tone, especially the Quick Rod. And yeah, it's so weird, man. When I first got into guitar gear around 2010, I saw Splawns very frequently on the used market, and they were priced, you know, decently high back then because they were still kind of like a hot item, but like all the buzz around them was seeming to cool down, and it seemed like Friedman kind of stepped in and stole the Splawn spotlight or the fire as far as like the modded Marshall boutique amplifier market goes. But I really think that the reason that Splawn is not as popular today as it once was is because Scott just hasn't come out with any new exciting circuits. He doesn't really do anything to grow the company. I actually read in an interview with him that he wasn't really interested in becoming like a massive company. He wasn't interested in becoming a massive name in the guitar gear industry. He basically just wanted to have his small crew that he has down in North Carolina building amps as they got the orders coming in and never really expanding the business. So in my opinion, I totally get it. I totally get it, man. The bigger your company becomes, the more of a hassle it becomes, the more difficult it becomes to manage, the easier it is to go under, because if something happens where all of a sudden you can't get the parts that you need anymore and you can't build the amps that your customers are looking for, well, now all of a sudden you can't pay the people that you have on your payroll, and you have to make the decision of, do you lay people off or do you just continue paying them until your company goes out of the business because you can't build your product anymore because the parts are pretty much impossible to come by. I mean, I get it. I totally get that, but it bums me out to no end because I really do think that if Scott continued innovating, continued doing tweaks to the circuits and coming up with, you know, different models and advertising a little bit more and building the company, that they would still be a premier name as far as boutique modded Marshall style amplifiers go. And that is honestly something that I would love to see because he's a good guy. His amps sound absolutely incredible. I am a massive fan of anything that is related to the Quick Rod circuit. The Nitro is cool. I would like to see some tweaks done to that because it's not nearly as balanced of an amplifier as the Quick Rod is, but it definitely has potential to be something like a 6505, 5150 style, just ultra compressed, ultra gained out monster. It just needs a couple tweaks in the EQ to really balance it out a little better, in my opinion. But yeah, man, Splawn, great amps, great company, great guy. And one of the main reasons that you just don't see Splawn talked about anymore is because a couple of other modded Marshall and boutique amplifier builders kind of stepped in, took over that spot as like the premier modded Marshall builder. And Splawn just never really kind of grew the company, never really came out with any more new or innovative designs after the Quick Rod and the Nitro came out. So therefore the company is just a little bit stagnant. It hasn't done anything to grow. It hasn't done anything to introduce new models to the public or market itself. And that's mainly why that they're not as well known. But yeah, man, I mean, I still love them. I'm still gonna play them all the time, especially in my bands. My 6550 Pro Stock is still gonna be my #1 amp. My KT88 Super Sport 50 over here is still going to be my ultimate travel amp because it's a lunchbox size amp that has massive transformers and KT88 power tubes in it. It's seriously super cool. And Scott's a great guy to work with. So, I mean, the amps are priced well on top of that for something that is built here in the USA. So, yeah, I can't say enough good things about Splawn, and you guys should really go check out his website. Hit Scott up if you want a custom build, because I had him spec this one out custom to me. It was no problem. He added a couple options that I asked for as well, and it was just a really cool experience. So, yeah. I think that's gonna do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, don't forget about that live stream. Again, my band Human Animal. I will put the link down in the description of this video for you guys to check out. I am still selling a ton of gear. I've sold a couple amps, I've sold a couple pedals, but I still have a ton of stuff to sell. So if you guys are into guitars, especially because I'm selling a ton of guitars, I really need to get rid of some guitars and say guitars a few more times in this sentence. Guitars! But I'm selling a whole bunch of stuff, guys. Go down into the description of this video as well, where you can find my gear sale Instagram with a huge list of everything that I have for sale currently. And if you want to buy something, it helps the channel out. It helps me fund new toys for the channel. And I'm really trying to fund something from like Purple Nightmare. I'm trying to get a Monomyth amp on this channel. I would really like a Dean Costello amp sometime this year. There's all sorts of stuff that I'm trying to get in here. So I've got to sell this other stuff first before I can fund those purchases. So if you guys want to be a part of that, if you want to help out, again, Belligerent Gear Sales on Instagram, down in the description you can find the link to that. And if you want to support my channel in any other way, of course, liking this video if you haven't already, subscribing to the channel if you're not subscribed, and checking out my affiliate links down below, including my Sweetwater affiliate link. You know the deal. Click the link, get yourself something. I get a kickback. It costs you nothing extra, and it helps me move forward. Or you can consider adding your name to this list of fine people and joining my Patreon community. Like I say in every single episode, I've gotten 2 new guys in the last week, and I'm really happy to have the new members in. And the more members that I get, the more giveaways and stuff that I can do. I gave away 2 of the more Brown Sound pedals this week, and that was super fun. So I want to continue to do more stuff and give back to my patrons in the future. There will be more stuff on top of that in the digital realm that I will also be including to my patron members once I get all that stuff figured out. But there will be benefits, I promise. But for now, I really appreciate all the support that everybody has given me. Thank you guys so much. Kyle here again. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.